Grow, Sell, and Retire is the podcast for the lazy overachiever. B.D. Dalton, author of True Gravity and Grow, Sell, and Retire, is here to give you his 25 years of secrets, tips, and systems to take your business to the next level. This is your chance to find out what is working in sales, marketing, and running your business. If you stop learning, you stop earning. Now, here's your host, BD, with today's GSR podcast.
Hey everybody, BD Dalton here, Grow, Sell, and Retire podcast. Today I'm talking to Devin Dvorak. We're going to be talking about being a revolutionary in weird and stagnant business cycles. So, Devin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me be on the show.
Where are you at right now? Where are you at in the world?
I am in Dripping Springs, Texas. It's just outside of Austin in Hill Country.
Very cool. So give us a little potted history so that the listeners will know where you come from and what you're doing, because you've been in real estate for quite a long time, even though you're a young guy, been in real estate most of your career. So walk us through a little potted history.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so I grew up in a real estate family. I'm a third-generation realtor. My grandma was a realtor. Dad was a realtor. I set my first open house with my dad, I think when I was 10 years old. He had two listings across the street from one another. And probably my first word when I was a little kid, I was appraisal. My mom was a mortgage banker. So I've been in the industry, both on the mortgage banking, finance side, and in the real estate side, but I've always been really attracted toward the technology end of things. How can we leverage technology, automation, et cetera, to really bring about a more efficient, consistent experience? Because anybody who's ever bought or sold a house probably agrees that it feels like it was that agent's first time ever doing it. You know, it looks like it's always a fire.
Well, and the big thing over here is you've been over in the UK. You came over to the London School of Economics, but the estate agency in the UK is so different than the States. So tell us a little bit about the experience of having a buying agent, listing agent, or selling agent versus over here where one person does pretty much everything for you.
Yeah. So in the United States, one of the key differences is we have buyer agency and seller agency. So those are kind of fancy terms for you represent the buyer or you represent the seller. And in some states, it's actually illegal to represent both with a fiduciary duty. Texas is one of those states. So in Texas, you actually have to have a buyer agent and a separate seller agent unless both parties agree to you acting as an intermediary. And so it's really interesting. Typically, the commission is paid 6% to the listing agent, but then they have a cooperating agreement via the MLS and enforced by the MLS, which is this multiple listing service, to pay a cooperating commission, typically, which is half. So 3% gets to the buyer's agent. So it's kind of a...
Yeah, it's a weird one because over here everybody just is used to a single agent. So this opened up a kind of and over here in the UK, and we have purple bricks, but this took you to kind of one of your first iterations with Jovio, isn't it?
Correct. Yes. So with Jovio, we thought, how can, when you're listing a house for sale, that's heavily process oriented. You need to get your ducks in a row, get the house prepped and ready, get the marketing supercharged, and really just get a bunch of forms filled out, get things entered into the appropriate system. So that is a great use case for how do we leverage an automated process, a streamlined process, build a UI, UX around it that makes sense for people who are not realtors. And so that was really the first project we had at Jovio, because we were able to streamline that, and because the way the commissions are structured, we were able to say, okay, we're going to just take 1% for doing that because it's not that much work. And we'll still allow you to be competitive with the other buyer agents out there that have buyers they're working with, and you can offer 3% and give them that net savings of 2% commission back to the seller.
That's good, and it's disrupting a very, very old system that people with. So because you like to go in and kind of be revolutionary when it comes to older systems and things like that. So what were some of the headwinds that you saw when you were putting Jovio into place that kind of got in the way of changing an old school system?
Yeah, every system always has some sort of barrier to entry, and it's always it's always something that has kind of a compliance or governmental twist. In the taxi system, it's a medallion. In the 3-tier beverage system in the United States for alcohol, it's this heavily regulated 3-tier system after the prohibition. In real estate, what it is you need to be a licensed real estate brokerage to kind of even be able to have agents that can talk to people about selling their house. And a lot of times these agents don't have much education. It's a low barrier to entry to become an agent, but because of the bureaucracy, because of all of the different organizations you have to pay to kind of have your credentials, it's somewhat of a barrier to entry for many. And especially on the innovation side, the data is all protected underneath these MLSs. And so if you want to access that data, the data licensing requirements are made up by one of the 600 MLSs. There is some sort of oversight at the national level, but they have a little bit of room. Now, there was a big lawsuit with the Department of Justice and the National Association of Realtors. It was settled, and little by little cracks have formed where they have had to adapt their policies, they being the MLSs, to allow data to flow to companies like Jovio in a way that doesn't disadvantage Jovio because they're a virtual office website is kind of how we are technically referred to versus a brick and mortar traditional real estate brokerage. So, there's definitely a big barrier to entry in that sense, but it's not hard to navigate.
You've measured that up, and so that you've told me the Jovio is kind of the entry point now. So what's next for that iteration of Jovio and looking at the industry to make it even better than where you got to with Jovio?
Absolutely. So our mission and vision are always closely aligned with home ownership. And we believe that real estate is the best asset and that it should be the most inclusive asset, that everyone should have access to it. Some of the far-reaching ideals and ideas we have, even involve fractional ownership or ways to leverage conveying a property without the current title regime. So what we want to do is really promote homeownership, make it very accessible. And so we created Jovio as really a testing ground. We needed those credentials. We needed to have full control and purview over the customer experience to really understand what is the underlying problem that's plaguing residential real estate. What are these information asymmetries? How can we break them down? How can we empower the consumers to have a more proactive role in the sale or purchase of their home? A home is such an intimate place and it's an emotionally charged transaction. How can we build a product to help facilitate that? And so the next iteration of this is we've been studying this for 2 or 3 years internally. We've had all of that direct access to agents, to clients, and we've understood that the core issue is really a collaboration issue. When there's a buyer's agent and a seller's agent here in the United States, they talk to each other through various mediums of communication. They use different systems, different products. Those systems and products don't talk to one another. So you have a lot of duplicate data entry. You have a lot of erroneous data. And then you have a lot of just extremely inefficient processes. It's very common for people to print documents, reorder them, and then scan them in, for example, and just do a bunch of silly processes like that. So what we've built is a new company that we're launching here in the next few months called Jointly. And what that is it's really the first collaboration tool for real estate agents, their clients, and third parties. And so that's going to enable everyone to be able to come to this agnostic platform, to be able to negotiate any sort of terms. So whether that's a listing agreement or a purchase contract, we can solidify those terms in a very nice user interface before putting them into those ugly contracts. And we can be able to amend those and execute them all in this single unified platform. But most importantly is that because we're using Jointly to draft and execute these documents, all of that underlying data is now being stored, and we can leverage that data to drive automation, efficiency, et cetera, in the transaction. And that's what's really not being done today. A lot of this is being done in one-off systems, and that data is being lost, especially when it's printed and then scanned back in.
That's good. And so when, this is an old system. MLS has been around for the multiple listing service has been around forever. Estate agency has been around for a long time. And were there people you had to win over to kind of bring into the fold for the information, for things like that? And how did you win them over?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's various levels of bureaucracy. At the very top, you have the National Association of Realtors, and they have purview over all the local and state-led organizations. So each state has an association. So there's the Texas Association of Realtors. And then inside of the state of Texas, each region or city or town has a board of realtors. So the Austin Board of Realtors. And so in total, you have all of those organizations, but then there's also the multiple listing services, which are created and serve the members of these local boards. And there's roughly about 600 of those throughout the United States. And they basically are a syndication tool that brings together all of the listings that any brokerage or agent has and publishes them in an internal software that agents are able to see that. They do syndicate to public sites like Zillow here in the United States or Realtor.com. But the main value it adds is it stores what the commission is that's being offered on a property, and it communicates that to cooperating agents. And it's also a body that enforces that number. So if there's ever a discrepancy, the MLS is kind of the ultimate decision maker there. So you have to basically know who's who. A lot of times the board of directors is going to be comprised of some of the top agents. And so in this industry, it's not the Pareto principle. It's even more juxtaposed. You have 90% of transactions, of residential real estate transactions, are done by 10% of the agents. And so what that tells you is that 90% of the agents are either part-time agents or not serious agents, and that the most of that transaction is done by 10% of the agents. And they typically have board of director seats on some of these local MLSs and associations, and they have the ability to sort of influence decisions. And so you need to make inroads with them, have discussions, show them what your building can help them. But there's also this sort of fear that they have that they're going to be disrupted or replaced. And so that's where you have to very decidedly make a decision. Are we going to partner with them? Are we going to try to disrupt them? What is our end goal? And that's where we've been very solid with Jovio, in that our goal is just to help homeowners and home buyers to have a better experience. We don't want to be price setters. We don't want to dictate certain terms. We just want to help facilitate a better real estate transaction, a more connected real estate transaction where everybody's on the same page. And so, I think that's been certainly a challenge. It's really, I think, starting with understanding who are the decision makers, where do they come from, what's important to them, and how does your product or solution fit into that. And for us, I think we're lucky that we kind of can play both sides in the sense that we are a brokerage, and so we can understand and empathize with the importance of data. But we're also a technology company at heart, jointly is. And so that's where we're able to kind of pierce through the veil of dogma and understand how it could be better. And in this industry, at least, there's a lot of solutions out there that were built by technology people that don't understand real estate, that sit and collect dust on a shelf, and vice versa, built by real estate agents that didn't understand technology. And so it's a very crowded space, but it's really important, to your point, to make sure that you are getting buy-in and you're getting the correct licensing agreements from those sort of authorities in the industry.
Cool. So you've gone through this. This has been kind of your industry since 10 years old. So what skills have you honed along the way that you think now you've gotten pretty good at them when it comes to business in general and sifting through not just being able to do paperwork or being able to sell really well? What are some of the things that you think that as an entrepreneur people should improve their strengths or focus on their strengths? And what have you honed in this process?
Yeah, such an important question, a really good one. And I think the number one skill that I continually hold myself accountable for improving is, how do I minimize risk? How do I minimize time? How do I minimize sunk cost? And it's very easy to kind of envision a solution and set out to solve it. But at the end of the day, if you don't have that buy-in from the larger bodies that maybe control or influence an industry, if you don't have your customers giving you that critical feedback as quickly as possible. If you don't identify who those initial early adopters are, who are those innovators that just need your product and will do anything to have it and will live with those bugs, if you don't identify those bodies of people at the right time and get them your prototype, your solution, get that in front of them as quickly as possible, what ends up happening is you end up living in la land, thinking things are going great, and you're not getting that critical feedback in a timely fashion.
So you're a big proponent of MVP as soon as possible, minimum viable product as soon as possible to start getting testing and feedback.
Absolutely. Or even a proof of concept. There's been times where we've built things and tools that we knew wouldn't scale, but time was just so important to us that we thought, well, we've really got to validate this. This is critical. This is pivotal. Let's build this very quickly and maybe a quarter of the time it would take to build an MVP, just a proof of concept to make sure we're on the right path. And that's one of the great things is there's a lot of great prototyping tools out there. We're big fans of Figma because it's one of those tools that allows us to prototype a web app and then put together a sort of a test, a user test, and then send as many users through it as possible. And it helps us, even on smaller things, just identify potential UX issues, but also helps us to validate a broader concept. And so that paired with just making sure that you identify who is that innovator, who is that early adopter, and I'm using terms from the diffusion of innovation curve, but identifying who are those people that you need to get in front of and who are going to help carry you to that next wave, to the early majority and to the late majority. So that's what's really critical. I'm a huge fan of MVP and lean and agile methodologies. And that's not just software speak. I think that you can apply that to any sort of industry or project.
Everything. I believe that, because I have a law firm, a financial advice firm, a fintech firm, a legal tech firm, and all that in the background. And we think that it's right until you put it in front of somebody and they go, "What's that for?" Or "Why does it have that?"
Absolutely.
And it's like,
it happens all the time.
Oh, it happens all the time. And especially if you believe that person is your ultimate user or your avatar or whatever speak you want to use, right? And you put it in front of them and they go, "Don't understand it." Oh, okay. So and fail fast, fail often. That's that.
Yep.
Be quick about it. And people get too, especially developers, and you sound like you've got business head first and developer head second. But developers get so deep into the development, they don't get into what somebody's going to use it for. They think I'll tell them what they're going to use it for. And that's quite disruptive itself to the overall distribution of the package. So, correct.
Not in a good way.
No, not in a good way. Not disruption. Disruption is a bad thing, not as a good thing.
Exactly.
So that's what you're doing. So next question is, and I think this is almost more important overall, is over the last year or two or three, especially maybe going through coronavirus or whatever we've gone through, what is something that you've stopped doing in your business daily life or as a professional, something that you've stopped doing that's made your life better, more improved, easier, more fun? What is it that you've stopped doing?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I think it's a really important one. I think I trace this back to a book I read, and it's not a business book. You won't find it on any business book top 100 list. But the book that I think has really influenced me and has held me accountable to stop doing things that I just want to do innately as a human being is called The Four Agreements. And so what it says is, first off is be impeccable with your word. That is the first agreement. And so what that means is, don't talk poorly about other people, but don't talk poorly about yourself. Don't have self-doubt. And I think that is an entrepreneur, especially day one. It's so easy when you show your product to that first person and they're like, this is worthless. At least for me, it was really easy to get kind of bummed out about that. And then kind of start maybe a cycle of negative self-talk. Oh, this isn't going to work. What was I thinking? This is silly. The second agreement is kind of goes hand in hand with that, which is don't take things personally. And that's another thing that I think is critical in business, especially when you're the entrepreneur, the CEO, and you've developed a solution or product that you love. It's your baby. And then you put it in front of people and they're like, not impressed, And so it's really easy to kind of take that personally and let that weigh on you. And so that's, another agreement, the second agreement. The third one, and this one is critical, and we've touched on it a little bit, is to not make assumptions. So whether you subscribe to first principle thinking or the scientific method or what have you, it's really critical to understand how your mind works and what some of these cognitive biases are, and to really just get down to the core of the meat, what is truth, and understand that, and not make these sort of false assumptions about your product, about your prospective clients, about the industry, but to really understand at the core of the principles, what are those sort of assumptions or beliefs that are driving it, and not to make false assumptions. The last of the 4 agreements, always do your best. And I think that's more relative. I call it the 3 agreements because I don't quite understand that one, to be honest with you. But it's kind of like, do your best, have grace with yourself, know that you're not a perfect human. But I really think that book, for me at least, has been so critical in helping me to be a better business person, and just as a guide to hold myself accountable, to stop in the moment and say, am I taking this personally? Am I making an assumption? And just have an honest conversation with yourself, if even for a few seconds.
That's cool. No, that's great. And I think that's the business starts with the person always. So it's, if you can be a better person, it always makes for a better business. So very
absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So here's some fun stuff, some personal stuff. Not that the other stuff wasn't fun, but so what bit of tech is making your life easier, more fun, enjoyable that you're going through right now, that you use either personally or in your business? It's making your life easier.
Yeah, so you're going to laugh at the first one, email. So I'm using this tool called Newton. It's an email application. It's one of the few paid email apps that are still out there. And everybody's like, what are you doing, Devin? Why are you paying for an email app on your phone? You can just use Gmail or Outlook or one of these other ones. And the thing I love and keep coming back to about Newton is really it's designed for somebody that gets a lot of email. I have 3 different business email accounts, and I can have them all in Newton, color-coded, and I can access and quickly search this highly indexed search for anything. So if I'm looking for an attachment from somebody I remember the spelling of their name from 3 years ago, which is kind of how I operate, I just type that in, and the index search just pulls it right up on my phone immediately. And so I found that that's kind of critical for somebody like me who lives their life in a mess, but knows that something's in there. They don't know where it is, but if they go searching for it, they know they'll find it. I'm kind of an email hoarder. So that's been great. In addition to, they have a cool feature that brings together all 3 of your calendars. So I have a G Suite account, I have a Microsoft 365 account, and then some other, I think another G Suite, but it brings together all of those sort of calendars so I know what's going on that day in a single view. And I think it's a unique problem because I've asked myself, why don't more people use this? Why haven't there been more solutions on the market for this? Why has Newton been bought and sold 3 times? Nobody wants it. But for me, at least, it's been absolutely critical. I mentioned Figma. That has been a really great tool for prototyping very quickly, but you also can build your high-fidelity user interface designs in there and then hand them off to your development team. That has been phenomenal. And I'd say the third tool, which has been really good for us in the services space, is Front App. And basically what that is it's a unified inbox collaboration tool where you can have support at yourcompany.com, and all of those emails, instead of flowing into a distribution list or into a single email account where we're sharing passwords, it comes into Front App, and then you can assign that to somebody on the team. If you have multiple people on your support team, somebody can manager can have direct visibility into all the responses. You can also integrate with text messages. So we used it in real estate. We had a lot of listings. I didn't want my personal phone blowing up all the time, so we created a cell phone number that routed text messages a certain way, and the inbound calls got routed a certain way. So Front App was truly revolutionary for us in kind of managing communication flow and expanding myself as a single person to allowing my team to respond to other inbound inquiries.
That's awesome. So those 3 things are very, very strong. So Devin, what are you reading right now for fun or business or both or either?
Yeah, so I've got one book that's coming up. I'm probably going to start it this week. I'm in between. It's called It's called Wine Politics: How Governments, Environmentalists, Mobsters, and Critics Influence the Wines We Drink. And so I mentioned earlier that I love industries that have a lot of bureaucracy and just complexity to them and are wildly inefficient. And so that is the book I'm going to start this week reading. Another one was recommended to me by a person on my team at Jointly called Critical Conversations. So I have not read that book. I've heard some good things about it. Enough people.
It's a good book. Critical Conversations is good. It's very good.
Yes, I got a copy of that sitting on my desk, and hopefully we'll start that one soon as well.
Do you use Blinkist?
I don't.
I would use Blink. I use Blinkist for everything. So I've already gone on to Blinkist right now, and I've got I've got the book that you just told us about. So I've got that downloaded
Awesome.
already. So the 4 agreements.
Beautiful. I'll have to check that out.
Blinkist is because for quick reading, and then I figure out if you like it, and then you go back to the book itself. So you can listen to it in about 20 minutes, quick overviews of the books, and then you go back and read the books that you use. So it's fun, especially.
Wow, that's amazing.
It boils down so you can read everything. It's quickly, and then go back to the pertinent parts and buy the book so the author doesn't lose out. So that's cool. So, but you also talked about broken things and older industries. Tell me about your project in 2020 that might have to do with South America.
Yeah, so I spent a number of years living in Argentina. I had a Fulbright grant to research economic development down there, and just really fell in love with the country. It's a beautiful country with great people and a rich culture and a very rich and interesting history. I studied economics, and so it's almost like an economist's playground because they go through some sort of crash or turmoil very quickly. So you get to kind of see maybe 5 economic cycles in the span of a couple decades, which might take a century normally. So it's been a really interesting country. I've had a lot of relationships and ties to it. And recently, given the coronavirus and all of these broken supply chains, this idea that I've had for a long time kind of came back into focus. And so the idea was simple. It was to bring some of the things that I love from Argentina to other parts of the world, predominantly and starting with the United States. So Argentinian beef is some of the best, I would say the best beef in the entire world, especially if you cook it the traditional way, an Argentinian asado. And so they just lifted the import ban last year in the United States, and there's this ability to bring in some of the best quality beef at rock bottom prices right now, just because of the local economy in Argentina and the coronavirus. And so that coupled with wines, olive oils, cheeses, leathers, and several other things where product categories we're looking at, water, high quality, filtered, pure water from Patagonia. We're bringing those products into the United States and then setting up a distribution model to go to retailers, high-end restaurants, hotels, but also direct to consumer. And so the interesting part and why I'm reading that wine book is that some of these areas are heavily regulated. Beef is, wine is. There's something called the 3-tier system, which basically says if you're an importer, you can only sell the wine to a distributor. If you're a distributor, you can only sell the wine to a retail grocer or a restaurant. And if you're a restaurant or one of those others, you can only sell it to the end consumer. But because of these sort of, I wouldn't call them loopholes, but we'll call them openings in the laws in between the states, there's this ability to build out a technology solution that allows you to deliver your product more efficiently with less middlemen, less costs, and you can build this sort of technology to deliver that. And so that's, very, very interesting to me, near and dear to my heart. And moreover, it's this great opportunity to lift up that country and its producers and help them have this sort of commercialization arm into the foreign markets, because today that's all but collapsed. It's closed, and it's a really unique opportunity we have.
Awesome. So then how do we find out a little bit more about you, Devin?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I love email. So Devin, Devin, @jointly.com is my email. And, I would love if anybody has any questions or thoughts or feedback. Would always love scheduling time. And if I can help or connect somebody with someone who can help, I love to do that. I think the entrepreneur's journey is and can be lonely at times. And there's kind of a few of us out there that can, really have that empathy for one another. So I think it's, we gotta help each other when we can. So I'd say email is the best. LinkedIn. I'm pretty bad on social. I need to probably make that a 2021 goal to get a little bit more robust social profile going on.
Doesn't sound like you're missing out on it. Okay.
So,
and then at the end of the show, we always do the killer question. So if somebody comes in, or killer comments, so somebody comes in and listens to the last minute of the show, and you're giving them a reason to rewind and listen to the very beginning of the show all the way to here. So what's one question or comment that you can put out there to the listeners that will help them be better today or tomorrow?
Yeah, I would say the one piece of one soundbite I would say is that if someone, including yourself, continually tells yourself, hey, this is going to be tough, this is a big challenge, this is not achievable, this is not going to happen, this is not going to change, I would say that in itself is the key. That is the signal that you are onto something that is truly worth pursuing, that you're looking at something unique, that you're going against the grain, that you're wandering off that path that's beaten, and that's your opportunity to change the world and leave it a better place and not leave it stuck in the ideals of someone else. And so I think that that's something that you've got to seek out and recognize and search for, and it kind of feels painful at the time, but if you stick with it, you start to realize that you're onto something really big, meaningful, important, and as my best friend Eric and I used to say, that you're writing a story that someday is worth reading.
That's awesome. Devin Dvorak, thank you so much for coming on the Grow, Sell, and Retire podcast and having a conversation with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Grow, Sell, and Retire. For more information, tools, or to book one of our team members to work with your team, business, or to speak at your event or conference, visit bartdaltonconsulting.com or email contact@bartdaltonconsulting.com. Buy the book True Gravity on Amazon. If you want to work for the rest of your life, that is your business. If you don't, that is ours.